All right. Great. And I see we have some organizations that have been established for a while. We've got a few that have been around for a bit and a few that are new ones. Could I ask you all to just put in the chat where you're from, just so that we can follow along with the states? It helps me a little bit. Sometimes there is information that I give that might be very state specific. So if it's a grant or something like that, not in this case maybe, but it's also good for you guys to see where each other is from. So if you could just put that in the chat, that would be great. And also feel free to go ahead and put your questions in the chat as we go along. I'll ask Andrea and Ella to follow along with those. You don't have to save them till the end. You can, but you don't have to. This is really informal. So let me share my screen. Okay. I've lost my little, here we go. All right. Okay. So board recruiting and succession. So the first thing we want to talk about really is, and by the way, I don't really have any housekeeping notes for today. At the end, we'll remind everyone when the next session is. Again, like I mentioned, you can be off camera, mute. I don't mind at all. This is for you. I do have one quick announcement, which is that I'm not sure exactly when we're going to start this, but we are going to start offering replays. The replays are going to be available to anyone who registers. We're not doing that currently, but we're doing that as part of our community that we're setting up and we're hoping to launch in the next couple of months. So you'll be able to access it anytime. You'll be able to watch the replays. If you miss it, it's fine. I think everyone knows by now that I love having people here together synchronously, because I feel like we gain a lot from our peers. I think there's peer mentorship happening. I think there are stories that have been told that I think resonate with each other, and it's helpful. Sometimes it's helpful. The questions that are being asked are helpful. So we will be offering the replays in the future, but just so you know, still not doing that quite yet. All right, so let's talk first about boards, board health. You know, we know, I mean, there are obvious aspects to strong and engaged boards, and we always jump to the thought of fundraising, but governance is crucial. So effective governance, communication practices within the organization. Typically, the board kind of sets the precedent for how a lot of communication happens, effective leadership and guidance. And then if we talk about the fundraising piece, yes, that is probably the strongest element. And we're going to go into one of the topics that I tend to talk a lot about, which is that fundraising represents so many different aspects of the process of solicitation. So when we think of recruiting board members and we think automatically about that pushback, we have to really keep in mind that yes, it's part of board service, but without a doubt, the most effective boards, the most effective organizations have boards that are willing to fundraise and that are engaged in the fundraising process, no matter to what degree. They may be the individuals soliciting themselves. They may be the individuals opening up their network. They may be the individuals that are thanking people. But typically, boards that do not focus on fundraising really cause their nonprofits to struggle financially. And this can just become a perpetuating cycle. So I think that when we think about what the overall health of an organization looks like, we may want to say, well, this is a working board, this is a governance board. We really don't focus so much on fundraising. We have a team that does that, or we have a committee that does that. It really doesn't hold true. It really doesn't hold true. So we know that a strong, engaged, and I would say a board that is fully built out meaning whatever that means for you. Maybe for your organization, it's 9. Maybe for your organization, it's 15 people. Maybe for some, it's 25. But I would say that having that board fully built out is critical. And one of the ways that we know that we can get board members really connected to the organization is through our existing board itself. So we're relying heavily on our current board to help this cycle of recruiting new board members, orienting new board members, developing a culture of philanthropy at the board level. So the board is critical. There's just no way to avoid it. And I think, you can start an organization, and a lot of you that have worked with me and that we've established your organization together, we may have said in the early days, it's fine if you just start out with 3 board members or 5 board members, makes it easy to get the documents signed. It makes things easy initially. But pretty much within short order, you should be thinking about growing that board, and you should be thinking about identifying individuals that are going to fill roles. So we're going to talk a little bit about board matrix. We're going to go through a few different areas. We'll talk about what that recruiting process looks like, who should be doing it, how do we identify the needs of the organization and what we're actually looking for our particular nonprofit. We're going to talk about what the succession planning process should be, because really succession planning should be woven into every single board meeting that takes place. Every single board meeting should contain a few minutes of conversation about board succession. And ideally, you should have a pipeline of potential board members that could serve. So I would say maybe 3 to 5 board members waiting in the wings. And maybe they're not going to be onboarded this year. Maybe it's, not till next year, but this is a process that needs to be happening continuously. So when we talk about the fundraising, and I do want to just touch on that really quickly before I get too far along here. So let me go back to that in a second, but I want to talk about the fundraising piece really quickly. So if we think about the 4 stages of the fundraising cycle, we have identification, cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship. Those are the 4 main areas that we focus on when we're fundraising. And only one of those is solicitation. Only one of them is asking for a gift. So identifying potential donors, inviting them to be part of events, hosting a small cocktail party with no ask, giving them tours of a facility. These are all big pieces of cultivation, and they don't involve an ask necessarily. And then there's the solicitation process, but then there's stewardship. And that means who is thanking the donors, who is creating programs to show appreciation, who is building relationships, ongoing relationships with these donors that are intimate. They are relationships that are built on humanity and connection. So there's one piece of that is the actual solicitation. And I just want us to keep that in mind, because this is the pushback. This is the elephant in the room. This is what we always hear. Oh, I really can't fundraise because, nobody wants, I really can't recruit new board members because nobody really wants to fundraise. Everybody says the same thing. So let's find ways around it. Let's get creative. It's a little bit of a cop-out, and it's an injustice to your organization. And the reality is you need board members. So we need to figure out a way to make this work. So I just wanted to clear the air on that, because I know that a lot of people, and we can continue to talk about it, and I'm sure there are going to be lots of questions, but I just wanted to mention that before we get too far along. Okay, so if we think about the board member life cycle, we have orientation of your board member. So after they've been recruited, we have their orientation, their affiliation, their participation. They kind of move up this trend where they become more and more engaged and more comfortable. Hopefully they assume a bit of a leadership role. And then the revitalization, right? Are they going to stay on? Are they going to re-engage? Are they going to move on to something else possibly? Absolutely, that's a possibility. So if we want to then really specifically focus on our ideal board member characteristics, what could that look like? And let's put aside for just a moment let's put aside other things like the diversity of your board. Let's really talk about looking internally about what your board is all about, what you believe in, what your philosophy is, what your culture is. And we're talking about things like, what is the dynamic at the board level? How do you handle board meetings? Is there an open forum for conversation and discussion? Is it really focused more on the hard work of governance? And it's a very serious board, and you have a lot of board members, and maybe not each person needs to be heavily engaged. Are many of your board members passive because you have a large volunteer base, perhaps? Are they very active? Is it large? Is it small? I mean, all of these things are points to consider when you're identifying people that you are going to bring onto your board. I want to just say also, when we think about a large board versus a small board, there are benefits to both. There are pros and cons to both. If we think of a small board, okay, maybe we're a little more agile. Maybe we're able to sign documents easily. Communication maybe is easier. Maybe the board members feel a great deal of satisfaction because their participation really counts. It's really valued. It really counts for something. When you're only 5 people, every person is pulling their weight. And so there's a tremendous sense of engagement. But by the same token, there's a heavy, heavy workload on those 5 or 7 people, and that can cause burnout. Fundraising can become a huge burden on the shoulders of those 5 to 7 people. And you lose the opportunity to gain opinions and insight from a broader group, from a broader perspective. So if we look then at large boards, we have the pros of having enough people to manage the workload. So there's a much better distribution, perhaps, of some of the responsibilities. If you're a heavy committee nonprofit, you have the opportunity for people to join different committees and get involved. You have a lot more perspectives represented. Fundraising can be a lot easier because it's shared. But then you also have some challenges with that too. So, for example, the fact that maybe board members don't feel as engaged in meaningful activities because there are 24 other board members on the board. And sometimes that can result in a little bit of apathy. And I've witnessed that. I'm sure we've all seen that in other boards that we're familiar with, where people just aren't as inspired. They aren't as passionate anymore. It's because you lose a little bit of the significance of your efforts, right? You feel like, well, if there are all these other people on there, I mean, am I really making a difference? Is my involvement, my engagement really making a difference? There's a tendency to form little cliques. The larger the group is, that sometimes happens as well, and that can sort of erode some of the trust. You may lose a little bit of individual accountability. And I think that the interactive discussions are limited a little bit, mostly by time, right? How do you conduct a board meeting once a month, make sure everyone gets heard, and you still devote enough time to interactive discussion? And you're supposed to devote a bit of time to succession planning every meeting, right? So it's challenging. So let's talk a little bit about the board matrix. I'm going to show you a board matrix on my screen. Hi, everyone who's joined recently. Hi, Eric. Wow, Eric. Long time no see. Okay, let me find my board matrix. One moment. I'm on a couple of screens here. While I do that, does anybody have any questions? Any thoughts or comments? Any of my experts in the room have any observations? Yep.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, the national average for boards is 15. The IRS has it between 6 and 9. So in terms of data, but I've spoken to, and I'm sure Kirsten, but I do a lot of work with nonprofits, as many as 65 on there. So I was like Congress. I don't recommend that one. I don't. Yes.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big number. Okay, so national average is 15. Interesting. All right, so we're going to look at a board matrix. And as always, I'll share these documents with you. I am I'm certified by BoardSource, and I have access to a lot of these documents. They're not meant to be reproduced without permission. So I will put them in the folder, but I'm going to ask you to be sensitive to that and use it for your own purposes only. So let's look at this matrix that we have here. So this would be something that you would compile per individual. We have the board member name, the number of years on the board, and their term, the expiration of their term, which is really, really important. This is something that I think doesn't get addressed enough. So we need to set up classes. And if you haven't heard that term before, it basically means that you have board members whose terms expire on a staggered basis. So you don't have everyone roll off at the same time. And you can establish that at any time. You can establish that at the formation of the organization. You could simply establish that at a board meeting. As you know, as long as the board votes on a particular item, you can amend something that is contained in your bylaws. So if you needed to say, well, this particular person is going to serve a 3-year term in order to, meet the class requirements, so not everyone rolls off at the same time. But do keep track of your current term expiration for your board members. We have their age, gender, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, community connections, financial, personal style, areas of expertise. This may or may not be relevant to you. Something that came up very recently in a conversation I had with a particular board is that this particular individual is being recruited to serve on a board, and she works for a bank. And every time she's recruited to serve on a board, she's put on the finance committee. Well, she doesn't work in finance at the bank. She works in marketing at the bank. So she says, how do I don't want to be rude, but everybody just assumes that this is where I want to be. I don't want to work in finance. I love marketing. That's what I do for a living. So, so we have to also be careful when we're conducting this process of making sure that we don't automatically assume that this is what people want to do. Maybe someone who works for a legal firm doesn't feel like doing anything to do with law after hours or as their volunteer job. So we can't make assumptions about people's professions and careers. So this is another, okay, so this would be the current members and prospects. So let me see, what was worksheet B? After all of them, okay, so we're compiling everything from the first worksheet in that one, which is the summary. Okay, and then let's see, where is my, okay, so this would be your final, this is going to be your final summary of everything. This is what you start out with. This is the one that really interests me. A summary is good, but I wouldn't have it laid out that way. I've seen other ones. In fact, I have another one, I think from AFP, that has everything on one page. It's a little easier to see. Hold on, give me 1 second. I'm going to get there. It's a spreadsheet. Okay. So this one's a little easier. I like this better because you can put the board member names in the top. Can you still see my screen? Does this say sample board overview? Okay. So you've got your board member names at the top, the term the term year that their term expires, their demographics, ethnicity, et cetera, et cetera. So you could just put in whatever you'd like on these parts. So I will be happy to share those with you in the Google Drive after the webinar so that you can access them if you like. You can make copies and use them for yourself. Again, oh my goodness, is that Kathleen Hayden? No. Wow, this is so much fun. I get to see people that I've known for such a long time. It's good to see you, Kathleen. All right, so let's go back here. Let's go back to our presentation. So let me see. So we're looking at ethnic diversity, gender diversity, skills, geographic. One of the things that is really near and dear to my heart that I don't hear enough about is multi-generational or life cycle diversity. So for example, having people that are freshly graduated from college, having perhaps mothers who are thinking about getting back into the workforce and they're not quite ready and they'd like to find something very productive to do with their time, maybe retirees. But I think we need multi-generational diversity as well. And I see that I don't see that enough. And I don't see that as a focus enough. And when I was living in Asheville, and Michelle, I don't know if I mentioned to you that I lived in Asheville, but when I was living in Asheville, I was recruited as a young mother who was taking a break from work. And I joined a couple of boards and it was incredibly fulfilling. I felt like I had such purpose. And after being in mom world for a few years where I just kind of wondered, well, what else am I? It was fantastic. It was just a really nice sort of re-entry into the professional environment. So I do encourage you to consider that life cycle diversity. I don't know. I made that up. It's multi-generational diversity. And so where are we looking for prospects? Well, we have to, you know what? There's something else I wanted to talk about. I'm sorry. The give or get. That's the other elephant in the room. The give or get. So how many of you, show of hands, have a give or get for your board? Does everyone know what a give or get is? Give, get, or get off? You either give a certain amount, you get a certain amount, so you go out and raise that amount of funds, or you get off the board. Give, get, or get off. Okay, Jacqueline, you have it. Simone, okay, great. All right, so two of you. All right, so here's some interesting perspective on a give or get. A consultant that I was speaking with said that give or get to her with all of the boards, and I think this is someone I knew from BoardSource. She told me that it tends to be a barrier for a couple of reasons. The first one is the obvious. You may be excluding people who are thinking, ooh, $1,000 a year, I just don't know if I'm up for that. But it also tends to set a little bit of a minimum. When you put in your documents a minimum give or get of $1,000, people see that as like, oh, they just want $1,000 from me. And they often won't give more than that. So it has another side to it. So I just wanted to point that out. I think that's very interesting. And one way to approach this might be to say that, are you willing to commit to having our organization amongst your top 2 or 3 charitable, contributions for the year, or the entities that you support, right? So are you willing to make us a priority in your charitable giving? I think that's a really nice way to frame it. And if you have it and it works and you're happy with it, awesome, great. But if you struggle with it and you feel like you don't want to exclude people, for some people, if you would like true diversity on your board, a recently graduated college student is going to have $100 for you or $200 for your organization. Do we want to exclude them because of that? Because they can't contribute $1,000? I don't know. I'm offering it up there. So at the end of the day, the most important thing is that we want 100% board giving. 100%. That goes without saying. There is no question on that. 100% board giving. There are foundations that will not fund you if you do not submit a statement saying that all of your board members give to the organization. There are individuals that you might invite to join your board who are going to look up your annual report and look up your board members and see, are they on the list? Because they believe so strongly that if you really have a passion for the organization that you're serving on, you should be giving. It is so much easier to go out and solicit funds and fundraise if you yourself are one of the people that give to that organization. You have skin in the game. You represent this organization. You believe in it. You can go out and you can raise money for it. or be an ambassador, or be an advocate, or be an appreciative board member who's thanking people. Okay, now let's go back to, I think the other thing is, we do want people that have a passion for the organization. We want people on our board that have a desire for excellence, right? They have high standards, and they maybe, depending on your entity, but I kind of think it's important to have an inquisitive, exploratory nature. I mean, there has to be a desire to be a little innovative as well. Do we want to just keep repeating what we've always done? Or do we want some innovation and novelty in our organization? So back to, where do we find prospects? We have prospects available to us through our current board members. We have prospects available to us through donors. And I don't know if any of you have ever really looked at your donor base and thought, I wonder, if these individuals might be potential board members. I wouldn't say automatically, and I certainly don't think that the monetary value of their gift should dictate whether they then become a board member or should have a seat on the board. Sometimes that can actually be problematic. So I would be a little bit careful with that. But your current board members, and this goes back to prospecting again as well, because it's when you put people on the spot and you say, okay, let's just think, who do you know, and who do you know, and who do you know? People don't always come to mind, but we have to ask them, put it on your radar. Think about it when you're at church. Think about the people that you work with, the people that you connect with. Look through the contacts on your phone. Look through the contacts on your phone. You may have some great potential board members there. Our donors. So we just mentioned donors. Volunteers and committee members. And by the way, sometimes having people serve as a volunteer or as a committee member is a great stepping stone for them to move into board service at some point. Your business and professional contacts. That's a huge potential source of board members. If you have a business and you pick up the phone and call your top 5, 6, 8 business contacts, maybe it's your insurance broker, maybe it's your, sorry, that's my dog who's a little whiny. Maybe it's your lawyer, maybe it's your accountant. You never know who they might know who could potentially be a great board member for your board. We have staff recommendations. Sometimes the staff has people that they might want to recommend. Foundations. Sometimes if you go to a foundation, maybe a United Way or a community foundation, sometimes they can help you identify board members. When people, and even a chamber of commerce, because often that's where people will turn who are looking to serve in the community. They'll look for where's the hub and who can I talk to about what's happening in the community and where I can put some of my energy because I really want to become involved in a board. You could host dinners, lunches. You could have a dinner party and invite friends and ask them each to invite a friend and have a dynamic speaker maybe about the organization. There are multiple ways. And again, if this process is kept up in an ongoing fashion and isn't considered to be a one-off, then you have a much better chance of ongoing success. Because it's like everything, you have to look at it every day. You have to be thinking about it constantly. It needs to be on your radar all the time. So let's talk a little bit then about the actual recruiting process and how that takes place. Iggy. So there are a few different ways to go about this. I think if you're comfortable with an application process, you should put together an application and have an application for people to complete to join your board, if that's what's comfortable for you. Maybe you have a section where they have to list their statement of interest and a couple of references. That's fine. Some people prefer to just do it by name, submitting names, that's fine. I think when you get to the step of actually having conversations with people, starting with a one-on-one is just a great introductory conversation. I think that when we're engaging these conversations, ideally, we want to have a clear idea of what the board job description is. And this process should really take place as though it's a job interview, because it really is a job interview. This is a job. They're just not paid for it. But, if they're an engaged board member, they may wind up, putting several hours a week into this effort. So make it comfortable, but certainly I think looking at it a little more seriously. So going in prepared, having a job description, having a budget for the organization handy, having maybe a case for support handy. Sometimes board recruits, board applicants will ask about a strategic plan. These are all good things to have on hand and make available to someone who's expressed interest. I think the other thing is when we're having these conversations, keep in mind, not everyone is that keen on attending board meetings. We have to think about if there's someone who attends a board meeting, they have maybe a reserved personality and they're a little shy, but they have other things that they bring to the table. We really have to weigh these things out in balance and not make rash decisions, because maybe that's a person who would be a great sounding board for your CEO or other staff members. And, most of the time people really want to use their talents, and we have to figure out what those are and what they're looking to do. So some of the questions that you might ask: what's your personal connection to this mission or to a mission like ours? What speaks to you about what we do? How much do you know about what we do? What would you like me to share with you? I'll be happy to tell you about our organization. What special skills do you have that you would like to use as a board member? I see that you work at a bank. Would you like to be on the finance committee? No, I really don't. Okay, what would you like to do? So working with them, really engaging with them to find out what speaks to their heart. The more we do that initially, the better, the more success you're going to have with these individuals as board members, because you've taken the time right up front to really dig in and really figure out what they want. What are they looking for? They're looking for a place to put their energy and their time. Okay. They have a passion for your cause. Great. What is it that they're going to be doing? They also want to have an idea of what that looks like. What is the time commitment? What is the give or get if there is one? All these things are important. I think also giving them an idea of how the meetings are conducted, if they're very stiff and formal, if they're a little more on the serious side, are they a little more jovial and relaxed? There's opportunity for conversation and exploratory discussion and generative conversations and innovative ideas. I mean, these are all things that need to be considered. What are your personal goals? Are we aligned with those personal goals? Does this resonate with you, what we just discussed? What would you like to accomplish this year? And what would you like to help us accomplish this year? And then what can I do? I, CEO, or I, board chair, what could I be doing to make this a really amazing experience for you? Does anyone have any questions, comments, or thoughts about those conversations with board members? I have an interesting approach to the recruiting process, the onboarding process, and it's really connected to this concept of succession planning, and we're going to talk about that next. But before I do that, I wanted to know if anyone has any comments, thoughts, suggestions, concerns. Have you encountered any issues in your recruiting that you think we could talk about as a little case study? Hi, Sandra. Hi, Zab. Marlene. Hi, Stu. Carrie, Mike. comments, thoughts, questions? Is it a little overwhelming sometimes? Do you not know where to start? Thanks, John. Does anyone have a really great experience recruiting board members that they want to share with us? Not yet? Not before today? Lulis?
I think for us, it's been kind of like it started with friends and family. I guess it starts that way. But of course, with different professions, kind of to fill out the different spots for the organization.
Mhm.
But I think we're at a spot right now where we really want to grow. And yeah, it is a little scary where to start because everybody that's on board right now, which I love my board. We personally, we know each other. It's like a family and I love it. And we have great board members with different skills.
Yeah.
We do need to fill out some other skills. We have to be prepared for those too, because we have to do all our due diligence. But yeah, it is a little scary because I was taking all these different workshops and things and how to do that. And they have all this, but how do you find them? I mean, it's easy said and done, especially our foundation that it's a fundraising arm. And it makes it a little bit more tricky. So yes, it is a little, and I wanted to build it in a way that it grows very strong.
Mhm.
And yeah,
it is challenging. And it feels, I think when we think about it, just sort of with tunnel vision, we think, where are they? Where are they? Where are my people? Right. But I think they're all around us. They're just not, we just haven't clued in yet, right? We haven't looked at this person or looked at that person, or we haven't gone to church and sat and looked around and thought, or maybe volunteered in an event and been around other people and thought, I wonder if they might be a good possible board member. So, and the other thing is it's a very daunting step to talk to someone about board service. It's a huge leap, right? It's like the Grand Canyon. So I think that maybe joining a committee, help me with this event, help me as a volunteer. I've got this great dinner happening next week. I'd love it if you could just come join us. So I think keeping the intimidation factor out of it and seeing what attracts people. But you definitely have to be doing a lot of these friend-raising events so that the word is out, so people hear you, they're aware of you, they know what's going on. You never know if it could be your CPA or your accountant or someone or your lawyer who says, oh, now that you mentioned children and education, or now that you mentioned, job placement, or you mentioned, there's this great organization. Have you heard of them? I mean, you just never know what's going to resonate with someone. Andrea, you had a comment or question?
I do. I just wanted to say, you pretty much have, I'd like to add on to what you just said as to, I think this is something it's cultivating that takes time, and we should never underestimate the power of that one volunteer, because I think engagement is the key. That if people can see firsthand the impact, if you can let the people fall in love with the mission, it might take a while eventually for them to really feel compelled to make that commitment. But the more you fall in love with the vision, the more likelihood that people will be on board with it. And maybe sometimes it is, these are all the ways that you can help, so that there is less intimidation as to like, well, within certain limits, of course, but the areas that we need help, and little by little getting people to understand what a difference they're making.
That's right.
I think that's really the ultimate goal. If you're really making a difference on the environment, on a child, on elder, whatever the passion is, that you're making a difference, and even if it's a little, one eventually hopefully a lot. So I think that's the piece, and we're just conveying it and not scaring people away. I'm like, no, how much can you give? what, maybe it's your talent, maybe it's your time, maybe whatever it is,
Mhm.
accept it, embrace it, keep cultivating. Don't expect, but always welcome the opportunity to give more.
Agreed. Yes, Michelle.
My phone is just going nuts.
Oh. We're going to move into, so in next month, we're going to talk about orientation. We're going to talk about all of these things that are really going to ignite the board and keep them passionate and engaged. So that's really the next big step. And I think one of those areas that I've never seen before, and I wish it happened more often, is board mentorship. So when you join a board, having another board member assigned to you as your mentor, not the board chair necessarily, but someone else who serves on the board that you can feel really comfortable with. You can ask questions. You can say, I don't understand why we skip over this, or why we didn't talk about this, or, why is the meeting so quick, or why are these, having your buddy who's kind of helping you out with the board. Well, how does everybody dress for this thing? Or, should I bring food? I didn't eat today. I'm wondering, can I bring my salad? No, we don't eat. Okay. Whatever the case may be, right? But having a board mentor, I think, would be huge. I've never seen it done before. And I've read a lot about it in Board Source, and I really wish it were implemented more often, because I think we'd actually have a higher success rate with retaining our board members. Before I go to Michelle, has anyone seen this? Has anyone seen being assigned a board mentor as you join a board? No? Okay. All right. Just curious. Yes, Michelle.
Yeah, quick question. Thank you, Kirsten. So would a good step be, is this is what I was thinking of doing for our board, is to bring on some advisors initially who could then potentially later become board members, but just create a board advisory?
Yes, that is a great step. You can have an advisory committee. You could call it whatever you want. You can just say board advisors. But yes, I think it's a great step. I think I would be cautious about the level of access, maybe, to board meetings and governance, and maybe board resolutions and so on. But I think certainly especially if any of the board meetings are being conducted via Zoom, where it's easy for them to hop on and hop off, having a segment of the board meeting dedicated to them, or having them attend the regular board meetings, but maybe not the annual or something like that, where maybe there are things being discussed that for whatever reason, like nominating and recruiting board members, but I think it's a great idea. I think it also gives them an opportunity to, first of all, feel like there's some value, because presumably there's input that they might be able to provide in some capacity, but then also to get to see the workings of the organization and of the board. You can also transition your board members that are terming out, you can transition them to advisory. So I'm currently on the advisory committee of a board in Delray Beach. And I love it, because I don't have to attend every board meeting, but I get to be involved, and they keep me in the loop on what's happening. And the board chair reaches out every so often and, lets me know how things are going. And I support them financially, which is a joy. But then I'm also kept informed without having these, ongoing obligations where I sort of feel like, oh, I've got to join that board meeting on Friday and I've got something else going on. So it's a nice intro, but it's also a nice outro, I think. So, yeah. Okay. So we're going to talk about.
I have a question.
Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sylvia.
This is Sylvia. First of all, thank you very much. Very clear. What are the main reasons for board members to leave? What is your experience there? Why do board members leave?
What a great question. Well, the first one, it might be the end of their term. Often I hear that they are simply too busy with other responsibilities. Every so often there's a conflict. So someone, for example, who may be running for a position within the city government or something may not be able to serve on your board anymore. But I would say the most concerning one that we actually have control over is what I mentioned earlier. It's apathy. It's because they don't feel engaged. And that's because a good job wasn't done when they were onboarded. to find out what it is that really speaks to them. What is it that interests them? And let's make sure that we're finding ways for them to contribute in whatever it is that speaks to them. But apathy is probably what I see the most, and burnout. So probably apathy first and burnout, which those were the two symptoms, one of a large board and one of a small board, right? So apathy in a board that might be too big has a lot of committees. There's a lot of people doing different things. And like, well, and I felt like that. I've been on several boards where I thought, I don't even know that I'm really making a difference. I mean, am I really impacting the organization? Does it make any difference if there are this many board members? And, but the same with the burnout. If you have too small a board and there's just such a big burden of weight of work, of fundraising, particularly if funds are limited. What else? What else have other people seen in terms of reasons that board members leave? Yes, Sandra. Good to see you, Sandra.
Same. I'm happy that I was able to log
I
in.
know. I'm glad you're with us.
Yeah. So thank you so much for the information. Very helpful. In our experience, type A personalities, when they don't know what to do, so there might be wonderful people, they love the mission, but like we had this woman who worked with a bank, and we had her as a treasurer, but she didn't understand, and she didn't know how to be the treasurer, and she didn't have the time. So she says she resigned because she didn't feel that she was doing a good enough job. And she resigned, and she's still part of supporting us. She still comes to events, she sends us donations, but she felt that she wasn't doing a good enough job. And we have now our secretary who is having the same situation. She is great. She loves the mission. She'll be engaged, but she has so much on her plate, and she doesn't feel that she's doing a good enough job for the organization. So type A personalities tend to quit and resign because they don't feel they're doing a great job. And on the other hand, as the organization, we said, like, please don't leave. It's okay. We understand that within time you'll be able to have time to support us. Please don't leave.
Yes.
And they said, like, no, I don't feel comfortable. So that has been our experience.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. And I don't know what the remedy for that is, right? Because I think with some personality, you just put that pressure on yourself. I think that's just part of their makeup. I don't know that there's much that we can do to remedy that, besides try and lessen the load. But I mean, again, if funds are constrained and it's a small group, it's tough. It's tough. Any other thoughts on that? Okay, yes, Ella. Ella, do you have a comment? Oh, we have a
there is a question in the chat. This question is for Mike. The question is regarding 100% of the board being required to give. Are we talking strictly financial giving, or can it be a combination of personal donation as well as time invested as a volunteer?
Good question. I think when we're talking give or get, we're talking about a financial contribution. I think let's look at it from the perspective of, and I did actually have one of these applications in Asheville when I was completing a grant proposal, and it said, please list the board members, please list which ones give a financial contribution to the organization. So I think for the most part, we're referring to financial contribution, but honestly, it depends on the organization, right? I mean, an organization can say, you know what? Financial is great, but we are extremely volunteer heavy, and we actually need people to come and help us with things. So I think it depends on the organization. I really do. Does anyone have any other thoughts on that or comments? Yes, John.
Yeah, we kind of talk about a contribution that's important to you when we're talking about it, and whether it's a financial amount or time of energy or whatever. So we've had many examples of people who, over the years, who haven't contributed financially, but contributed in other ways. And so we welcomed that.
Yeah. Again, I think it depends on the organization.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk. Andrea, did you have a comment?
Yes, I just wanted to say that having that option of giving in-kind donations and or be heavily on volunteer way, it can give the opportunity of having more of a diversity within the board. Because what if the person who's truly committed can't financially truly help out, or is not the type of personality that would feel comfortable going in and doing the ask for monetary donation, but maybe that person has the skills and the mindset to really collaborate in other ways. So I think it depending on the organization and if they can support and based on it, I think it opens the door for having that diversity.
Agreed. Yeah.
Because
completely agree.
having a diversity from both ethnically and coming from different angles on the financial side, then it opens the opportunity for reaching a larger audience as well, because then you truly are engaging with everyone from different angles.
I have to say, I have seen all kinds of give or get requirements, including you must sell, 10 gala tickets for our annual event. I have seen all kinds of requirements, and I would just recommend limiting those, keep it as simple as possible, and go with your heart, go with, the culture of your organization, what feels right to you. Later on, when you're bigger and you're more sophisticated, you can figure out other mechanisms. But I think for now, yes, and make it fun. Exactly, John. That's the other thing, is this is people's spare time. So, making it light, make it fun where you can, not taking ourselves too seriously. So let's move into the succession planning really, really quickly. Thank you for that, Ella. Okay, so effective succession planning. So one of the things that, we're all familiar with nominating committees, right? Typically, a nominating committee is thrown together a few months before a few people are going to come off the board, or maybe the board chair his term is coming to an end, their term is coming to an end. And nominating committees are kind of thrown together. They present a slate of names, and they elect maybe the board members and they elect the officers. And the rest of the time they're sort of dormant. Often they're just the people that are included in a nominating committee may not be involved in other things. They just happen to be available. Maybe not the ideal people to be doing the recruiting at the board level, and so an alternative to this is maybe a governance committee or a board resource committee. And it's a committee that is really focused on ongoing recruiting efforts, ongoing orientation, ongoing professional development, ongoing board education. So they meet year round. They would be, ideally, this committee would be chaired by a very strong person on the board. Their duties would be everything from the recruiting to also doing an assessment of board health. How are we doing right now? Who does that for your organization, right? It's something we kind of forget to do sometimes, and yet it's critical. We've just determined, look at the reason people leave. Board health is really, really important. Board performance is really important. So the board as a whole, individuals, also, they would have the responsibility of developing position descriptions for board members, maybe refining them, adjusting them as needed, evaluating the needs of the board. So really taking a close look at where are some of the gaps, where are some of the weaknesses that we have right now, and developing maybe profiles of people that could be filling some vacancies so that we're always kind of on the lookout. They work with the board to help find the people for these board positions, because it's their responsibility, this committee's responsibility. There tends to be more diversity because they're looking critically through that lens, right? So instead of me as a board chair saying, "Oh, I found someone great, we're going to bring them on the board," we have a committee that's saying, "Well, submit the name, and then we're going to take a look at who we have in the pool and what our needs are, and we're going to make the decision of and make the recommendation of who should be nominated for board service." So they also, are critical when it comes to board orientation and really, I think they play this critical role. And what happens is, instead of our efforts being haphazard, in fact, instead of it being what I just described, where it's like, oh yeah, I ran into this friend, she's really awesome, I'm going to bring her to the next board meeting and we're going to elect her onto the board. I mean, that is 9 times out of 10, that's how it happens. That's how it happens. I know that's how it happens because I've been there and I've done that. But is it the best thing for our board? Is that really the way we should be doing this? I vote no. I think it requires much more thought. I think and here's the thing, here's why, if you can keep it present, if you can just include it in your agenda for every board meeting, spend 10 minutes on the topic. How are we doing with our recruiting efforts and our nominating efforts? Where are we? Have we identified a few individuals? No. Okay, you need some help. Okay. John and Mary, you guys are going to go and talk to a few people when you go to the chamber event next week, or who else? I mean, we need to be feeding them and helping them with potential board members. But if you keep it on the radar, it's the same with fundraising. If it's something you look at every month and you talk about every month, it comes to life and it becomes something that's a tool and it's a resource for you, instead of just a forgotten item. And you're like, oh my God, did we look at the bylaws to see when our terms expire? I have no idea. When does your term expire? I don't know. When does your term? I don't know. I thought we were on for 3 years. No, we're only on for 2. I mean, this really, there are things that we can do. So much that happens in our organizations we have no control over. There are things we have control over. So let's get control of the things that we can. And one of them is recruiting. And I will say that I also don't see a great job of board orientation happening, ongoing professional development. So even if that time for a particular meeting is devoted to some professional development, I mean, the other thing that governance committees do is keep the mission fresh by, if you have a representative of a program that's doing something really incredible, bring them into a board meeting to talk about it for 10 minutes, So there are ways that you can really activate a governance committee to help with the overall health and growth and recruiting, and just, really, really tightening things up so that we're not doing them randomly. This is not haphazard. This requires careful thought. It requires a lot of attention. It's people's time. The last thing we want is for people to be disenchanted and they come off our board and like, well, that wasn't so good. That was uneventful. So please keep that in mind. And as we go into a little more of the conversation about retaining our board members and really activating their passion, we're going to talk about what that orientation process looks like. We're going to talk about what we can be doing on an ongoing basis to keep them excited, to keep them motivated, to keep them informed, establishing effective communication pipelines, having them possible a mentor program, right? These are all ways that we can really, really be stewarding our board members too, because they are often donors. They are champions for our cause and advocates and ambassadors for our cause, and they require time and attention too. So, and the process does, right? We need to honor the process and honor the systems that drive our organizations. What comments and questions do we have? Or thoughts, observations? Does anything about what we talked about, does anything sound really awesome and you want to implement it right away? Would you like some of these articles? Because I have different articles, like the succession planning. I think I got that from a board source article. I'd be happy to share some of the large board versus small board. So we'll put those in the Google folder. Okay, great.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Sandra.
So I like the idea when, I don't know if I understood well, but also to dedicate 10 minutes to professional development during the meetings. I think that that's a great idea. It keeps people engaged, learning something new besides what we have to just like reports and all that. Do you recommend anything special? It's just like team building or maybe videos. Like, do you have any ideas for that? Because I would love to put that together for like the year topics or something.
You know, Sandra, our last session, which the slides are in the Google Drive, and you'll have access to those after this call. The last session was about software tools and resources. And thanks, Andrea. Have a good evening. And I would say that's one of the things that I hear a lot from board members is oh my gosh, the software, the technology, like I can't keep up. I don't know. And we shared a lot of them. So I would do things like that. Maybe pick a software like Loom, right? Loom is one of my favorites. I do everything with Loom. People say, oh, can we jump on a call? I've got some questions. I go, you know what? Can you just record a quick Loom video? Show me the document, what your questions are, and I'll record one back when I have a chance, because it might be 10 o'clock at night tonight, right? Like, or I may do it over the weekend. So Loom, it's free up to 5 minutes. But even I think that would be a neat thing to do, is helping board members with their technology, because that tends to be something that people struggle with. Maybe giving them an insight into something that happens at your organization. I love sharing. I mean, this isn't so much professional development, but it is a little bit. But I love sharing like the life story of maybe a program director or a constituent in your program. So, you know, really talking about who people are as humans, right? What are the things that they've done? I mean, oh, did you know that this person is a professional singer, or they're a flutist, or they're this or that? I mean, there are neat things within our ecosystem that we could share. But then on top of that, I think staying on top of research, staying on top of great things that are happening out there, really keeping the board informed about your topic. So what are the, whatever your entity really focuses on, I think any cutting edge research, things that are coming out, stats, those are always good things. And I will say fundraising, education on fundraising is always important. So professional development and really focusing on fundraising, or talking about, giving statistics. But yeah, I think, Sandra, it really helps to liven things up at the board. I think that it's just a neat. I mean, you could also ask the board members themselves if any of them have a topic that they'd like to talk about that they find interesting. Yeah, John.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. So our next session is on July 11th, Tuesday, 6 o'clock. It's board engagement and passion. Again, does anyone have any comments, thoughts, a discussion? I always allow some time for us to have animated conversations. We've had a few good ones. One of them I'll never forget was, and I can't remember, Lulis, maybe Lulis wasn't there, because I think that was before you were able to start joining on the Tuesday sessions. But when we did a script of a major gift ask, and we did that right here. We put it together and we practiced it. And this was someone who was with us on the webinar. And she said, I don't know how to ask this person for a gift. I just don't even know what to say. I don't know. I can't, the words won't even come out. And so we scripted it for her right here. Right. And we all kind of listened in and contributed and gave our thoughts. But does anyone have anything else they'd like to talk about or to share, or any questions? Do you have any really challenging board issue that you want to talk about, that you want to tackle?
I don't have that, but I would just like to say that I've really valued what you've shared, the insights, and in a succinct way. And
thank you, John.
Yeah, super, super helpful. So
thank you. Thank you. Well, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. This really is, this is fun. And I love, again, I know that replays are super convenient, but it's just so nice to have people in the same room. I mean, look, Sandra, right? Like your question, awesome. And that forces us all to think a little bit, what could we be bringing to our board in professional development? So yeah, absolutely. And
what's
yes,
also interesting. Yeah.
go ahead, Michelle, sorry.
Oh, no, as I've transitioned from being a fiscal sponsor of nonprofits to my own nonprofit, that whole culture has rapidly transitioned from, I've been a nonprofit for 10 years, but now that but we were a project. And so that dynamic and that culture is very different than what I'm now just launched
Mhm.
as our own nonprofit. That I feels it's a different landscape, a whole different layout,
Yes.
a whole different palette.
Yes.
And I really appreciate this insight because I feel like I've done this, but I haven't. So
Isn't that
I
interesting? Yeah,
appreciate
it's almost
that.
like you've done it, but by association, not by, not yourself with the pressure, right? Yeah.
Correct. Thank you.
Yeah.
And yes, I also appreciate this webinar today. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. I almost forgot. Lulis was going to say something, but before I let you speak, Lulis, I'm going to jump in really rudely and just say that one of the challenges, and I'll bring this up at the next session because I really didn't touch on it today. One of the challenges that I have found, and this came up recently with a friend of mine who is Latino, who's looking to replace himself on a board. And I think some of you have heard me talk about this, that he has not been able to find a Latino or Latina or even just a non-traditional board member to join the board in his place that he can help recruit. And so this conversation came up, and we were at a foundation conference a few months ago, and there was a panel about really integrating diversity on your board. And it reminded me, and I brought it up at the time, and now it's come to fruition, and I can't believe it. I'm so excited. But it reminded me when I first moved to Asheville, you'll appreciate this, Michelle. I was freshly off the boat from the Bahamas, where I'd lived for 18 years, and I was already working in the nonprofit sector, but was a little intimidated, new place, new city. It's a little different in Asheville. I've been on an island, gosh, very intimidating. So I joined this program. It was a weekend workshop called Board Ready Asheville. And basically it's for people in the community who'd like to serve on boards, but have never done that, or they have already, but they feel like, oh, let me brush up on what it means to be a board member. And over the course of 2 days, they brought in a CPA, a lawyer, marketing expert, fundraising expert, just a number of professionals who educated us on how to read the financial statements and how to take a look at a budget, how to put together a budget, and what are you legally responsible for as a board member? What are your fiduciary responsibilities? Should you have D&O insurance? Yes, by the way, the answer is yes. All these different things. And then at the end, the last afternoon, they did a speed dating type thing and brought in 15 nonprofits, and there were 15 attendees. And so we all got to spend time. We did this little speed dating and we met the nonprofits, and it was a recruiting process. Like the board members were like, well, this is what I do. What are you interested in? Oh, I'm interested in children and health. Oh, okay, great. Well, that would, so Jeff over there, his nonprofit is, you might want to talk to him. And actually there were some matches made, which was really neat. Obviously that's just the beginning of the process, but it was really a neat program. And I think it empowered people who may not have normally, there were a lot of young people in very early 20s. There was a whole range of ages, but it was interesting because there were people who always thought, oh, it's so intimidating to go serve on a board, and I don't know how to read financials, and you get this education. So we are doing this at Lynn University in Boca on September 16th and 17th in 2023, this year, in a few months. The 15th is the start of Hispanic Heritage Month. And since I am Latina, we're going to do it in honor of that month. We're going to do it on the 16th and 17th. And it's not only for Latinos, but it's just a representation of our desire for diversity. And so there will be an application process. We're starting with a small pilot program, but honestly, I already have funders interested in this. If we're doing this through a nonprofit, which is called Calabria, that I'm involved in, and we have funders very interested in funding it. So it's already looking like it'll be going on for a while. And we are going to have also recommendations from foundations. So foundations that know of certain nonprofits maybe that are struggling to recruit board members, as well as nonprofits who have some people in mind or have spoken to people and they're like, oh, I'm terrified. I don't know what to do. And how do I be a board member? So it'll be a really, really neat program. And it's not me, I'm facilitating, but we bring in these experts, like I said, who will tell us all about what it means to serve on a board. And I just wanted you all to know about it because you may be getting some information, especially for those of you based in South Florida. You may get some information on that. And if you're interested, we'd love for you to apply. I can't remember if it's free or it's a minimal, maybe $100. I mean, it's minimal. It's really just to sort of reserve your spot. So meals, everything, taken care of. And also it's sort of fun because I'm still connected to some of those people from, 15 years ago that I met in this. It's really neat. So this is September 16th and 17th. Michelle, are you coming to Florida? You never know, right?
I'm going to be in Asheville, North Carolina, the 12th to the 14th.
Oh, well, you never know. Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's the other thing too. If you're someone who feels that they would benefit from going through this type of training, just because then you're better prepared to onboard new board members. I mean, there are multiple benefits to this. So anyway, I'm really excited about that. Don't forget as well, we have a lot of resources in the Google folder. I love Joe Garect and everything that he does. He's also someone that we know personally. Quality, stellar work. So, I buy a lot of his programs. I read his blog. So if you have questions about fundraising, you're probably going to find information on his website. And then also we have our YouTube channel as well. So you can always look up videos. We've got some fun recordings and videos of different topics there. And, reach out to me anytime if you have any questions. I'm always happy to help. So it was wonderful to spend time with all of you. Yes, Kathleen, that would be great. That would be great. So next time it's engaging and igniting passion in your nonprofits. Lulis, I want to know what Christopher No is doing in Florida.
Board meeting. I brought him here.
Oh my gosh. Honestly, when I first saw him, I was like, oh, okay. And now I'm like, wait a minute. What is he doing in Florida? Wow, that's great. Good.
Yeah. Just on that note, let me tell you something really quick. For us, it's been actually amazing, and we've been really lucky because every time somebody leaves the board, first of all, they leave because they've been with us for so many years and it's kind of like their situation kind of changes or something. But thank God they do stay at our board for a long time. For me, it's very important to maintain our board that it's not just very professional, but on the other hand, like a family. So it's kind of like a magic sauce that I don't want to lose because they were telling me, I mean, I took that, I was investigating about this, bringing board members, and there's all these sources, like if you go to LinkedIn, you can place like an ad or something for volunteers, and then you can do also there's like centers for volunteers, and then you can do that. You know what? We've been really lucky because our own board members may cultivate somebody, think about somebody, bring them on board. And I have to tell you, we have the best board, very professional, but we are like a family. So we know each other and we really are good together. I don't really want to lose that. That's kind of part of me. And I don't want to lose my board members either because they've been too long or because they're burnt out, because that's the other thing. I want them to keep like a very engaged, happy, passionate. And I have to say, I love it because also we are very diversified. We have young people, older people like me, and then we have different ethnicities, and I love it. And we're serving a community that is not here, but it doesn't matter because what we do transform lives.
That's right.
So just going back to the board, I don't want to lose that magic in my board. I don't want to lose that connection,
Mhm.
that being a family. That's my other thing. But I know it has to grow though.
Do you spend time with each of the board members? You do, one-on-one?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I just picked up.
I think that's
Christopher from
critical.
the airport.
I was just gonna say, including Christopher, who apparently is at your house right now.
Well, he just left, but I picked him up from the airport because it
Oh.
was very important for us to have him in person tomorrow. And once in a while, we're trying to have all together in person.
So that is just so important for next time when we talk about engagement, ongoing engagement and passion. I think spending face time with people is so important. And there's a human connection that you just you can't substitute that, you know? So I love that you do that. How often do you try and do that, Lulis? Is it like once a year, maybe?
Being all together?
Yeah.
Oh, no, more than that, because Christopher
Oh.
used to live here. So we used to have that before pandemic. We used to have all our meetings, of course, in person.
Mhm.
And now after pandemic and he moved, so we try to have them, I don't know, maybe 2-3 times a year. And now we're
Okay.
having social events with the board. So we can
Wow.
combine that with, without just having a board meetings and themed board meetings, which
Mhm.
are not like, nobody, I mean, they don't have to participate, but they're just good to know. And it's more informative, it's more relaxed, and themes that they are concerned about or they want to bring up to the table. And so we have that alternate with our regular board meetings.
Good. I like that. So that's almost like topics. You can just pick topics for discussion that the
Yes.
board. I think that's really healthy. So is that every other month, or how do you? Oh, okay. So 1 month is sort of a governance, more serious meeting. You check the financials and then the other one is a little more like you have an open discussion. Now that would also be a good professional development opportunity, Sandra. You know, instead of doing the 10 minutes, maybe you could just intersperse in the board meetings. And I think that kind of keeps it interesting, right? Because then you're like, oh, I don't want to miss this one because we were going to hear from so-and-so, or we're going to work on, right? So that's neat. I like that, Lulis. I really like that.
We're including those and including the social activities. And the one that I did not include before, or maybe a little bit, but it's very important, and I'm going to include it from now on, is the recruiting part. Because there's terms, and even though some of our board members last for a long time, I know I have to be realistic, and there's terms, and there's spots also right now.
Right.
But I want to keep my board as long as I can.
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially if what you have is working, right? If it's working, fantastic. Now, next time we're going to talk also about what to do about problematic board members, because that happens too. It's a topic we don't love, but it has to be addressed because, you know, one toxic board member can really, really cause problems with the entire board. So we want to be very, again, we do ourselves a disservice, right? Because we're not honoring everyone else that's on our board if we continue to tolerate misbehavior or, you know, whatever it may be. So, and the reality is that there are times that things take place that they're not supposed to happen ethically, right? Whether it's disclosing confidences at the board level, what's discussed within the board is meant to be confidential. Sometimes these things get out, and so there are all kinds of circumstances. But that's really great, Lulis. I love it. Wonderful. Good. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for such a fun hour. Great to see you all, especially the people I've seen recently, like John and Merlene. Thank you. Sandra, pleasure to have you. Is this your first time joining us? I'm so excited that you were here.
Yes.
You found it helpful?
Yes, very, very much. We're in the moment of expedited growth right now.
Yeah.
So we went from being just myself and 3 board members, and the rest were just names, to now having a real board, and and so busy. And this
Yeah.
actually this time worked really good for me. So that's I'm hoping
Oh,
to.
good.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful.
But thank
Good.
you so
All
much.
right. Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you all. Thanks, Heather. Good to see you. Marlene, Sylvia, Lulis, everybody take care. And we'll see you next month.
So great to see you.
Yes,
Bye.
you too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.